everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and today I'm going to be crafting and showing you how you can create a Valentine piece of art by using some simple scraps of material and doing some slow stitching processes on that fabric. Only about 3 different stitches, all you really need to do, and you can create something really fun for your Valentine season. Today I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration called Can't Sleep Creations. We have 3 hosts for today's collaboration. We have Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling, Monica with Up All Night DIY, and Jody at Southern Seasons. Now you're going to find the links to their channels down inside of the description box, as well as a playlist for all of the other creators who have joined in today's collaboration. Definitely take some time, watch those channels. I'm sure you're going to be inspired to create something fun for your Valentine's season. Well, let's get started. I have lots to share with you. The stitching I'm going to be doing is called slow stitching, and you do most of the process in your hand. So you're going to want at least 3 layers of fabric normally to create a nice surface to stitch through and be able to hold it into your hands nicely. So the first surface I used was a wool felt blend fabric. The next layer I used was a piece of linen, and then the top layer is all the little bits of fabric that I'm choosing to use for this pattern. These patterns are pieces of fabric I just chose. I got a lot of them from pieces of clothing or tabletop linens, stuff like that from my thrift store. So it doesn't take a lot of fabric, but I usually look for items that might be interesting at my local thrift store. Once I have all of my patterns chosen out, I go ahead and I take some sewing thread and do a basting stitch all the way through my fabrics. So basting stitches are basically just big stitches up and down through your fabric, and this is going to tack my pieces down so they'll be held tightly, well, loosely tightly on my fabric. This way they'll stay put and I can place them that way. So that's the beginning stages of how you do your slow stitching. This is what it looks like on the back. You're going to have your pieces tacked on, and then once they're tacked on, you're going to be able to choose out your colors that you would like to use. I'm using just a regular embroidery floss. You could see that big old nest of embroidery floss over there. And I needed to figure out something that I was going to be able to store my threads in better and be able to create something that was more organized. I wanted to keep all of my things in one box. So I put my thread in there, my DM floss. You can put them on these little spool things. You can have them on paper. They're come in paper and plastic, but you wrap your thread on there. It works great. You can also use a threaded floss that is a twisted floss that doesn't come apart. You can add that, and I was going to be using some of that, my needles, and a pair of scissors. So this was going to be able to work great. I could put my project in there and work on it when I needed to. So the little twisted threads do come in different widths, so you can have skinny ones and thicker ones. And I do like using that twisted thread as well. The DM floss, you usually take it apart and use anywhere from 1 to 6 threads. Like I had said earlier in my introduction, I only use basically about 3 different stitches. Here I'm working on a sample just to be able to show you some of the stitches that I used. The majority of it, a lot of it, was just a regular straight stitch, which means it's up and down through all 3 layers of my fabric. And it's just a very simple stitch, something that you probably did in grade school when you were first learning how to stitch. When you get done, you just slide your needle through the back of some of the stitches in the back and pull it through those, and then just go ahead and clip it. You don't even need to put a knot. A lot of these fabrics are not going to be touched or held, so just sliding it through is perfect. The other stitch I used a lot of was called a seed stitch or a wandering stitch. It's kind of like a running stitch, except for you're not going in a line. You're just randomly putting your stitches in, creating pattern and texture that way. You can double up your lines and have double seed stitches as well. Here I'm showing you on my finished piece where I did some straight stitching. I used a straight stitch around the edges to create a border. I also created a few X's with my patterns, so it's like a wandering stitch but making a pattern of an X. You can also do little stars with it. You can do a long wandering path as well. So you can create a lot of texture and interest on your little pieces by just using those simple stitches. The other stitch I used was a blanket stitch to finish off the top. You do a blanket stitch by coming through the back of your fabric first, and then going around it and coming back through the same exact hole, then pulling your thread tight, and then going at the top of your thread and coming underneath that stitch you just made so you're at the top of your fabric. Then go behind again, create a loop, and then bring your needle through. And that's going to make your blanket stitch at the edge of your fabric. It might seem a little complicated at first, but once you start it, you get the hang of it. It's kind of about getting the pressure right and pulling it just the right amount of tightness and making sure your line is straight up and down when you finish. And you can see here where I put that blanket stitch at the top. You can double it up. You can also do multiple blanket stitches across the top. You can use different colors as well. Now I needed to go ahead and create the heart for my project. So I made a heart pattern on some muslin and created my heart out of a muslin fabric. Traced around a heart and then went ahead and pinned my fabric and left an opening off to the side where I was going to be able to add the stuffing for the inside. I'm just marking it here where I want to leave the opening, and I'll be back stitching, say that fast 3 times, around those areas where I marked to secure it tightly and leave an opening. So once I have it stitched on my sewing machine, this one I use the sewing machine for, I'm going to go ahead and do a little clip, little motion all the way around the little edge of my heart. That's just going to help it lay better and not pucker when you turn it the right side out. Once you get it partially turned out right side, you can always use a paintbrush or something like that, a handle paintbrush, to be able to get your fabric to turn all the way out on your edges. I like this polyfill when I use it in my primitives, and it's just a nice polyfill to be able to fill it up. But you can also use some polyfill from a pillow if that's what you have too. This is where I'm going to be sewing it shut on my edge. So I'm just doing a little bit of a whip stitch basically around the edge, starting in one area, whipping it around on the other side, giving it a clip, and then I give it a nice massage to make sure that there's not a lot of lumps and bumps left in there from the stuffing. I'm going to be painting this a red color, so I'm using the color Tuscan Red to be able to paint it. It works really well if you add some water to your paint when you're going to paint fabric. It's just going to help it slide more easily across your fabric. So I added some water in there, loosened it up, and then now I'm just going to take a brush and paint my fabric. Make sure you're getting your edges when you're doing this, where the seams are, to make sure your thread is covered up when you're doing this step. Once I have it painted, I go ahead and give it a dry with my heat tool. You could do the drying in your oven too at a low temperature if you wanted to. Once it's dry, you give your fabric a light sanding with just a regular like 220 grit, not a lot of sand. You don't want to sand it too hard, or you can sand a hole in your fabric. Go ahead and do that process again, and after it's dry, give it another sand, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the coffee stain to my heart. This just deepens the color and gives it that real kind of antique-y look that I was looking for. I used my dryer again and dried the fabric. You can see that darkness quality, that an antique look that the coffee does give to the heart. Last step, I wanted to go ahead and add the fabric that I created, my slow stitching on there. So I just basically fitted it across my heart and folded it over, and I think it's going to work fine. And then I went ahead and did the scary part, cutting the fabric. So I just held it down and then just kind of guessed where I thought, and I cut off any of the extra pieces. Now don't worry, I'm not throwing those extra pieces away because they could be used in some other project. So I'll definitely keep the little scraps and hold those over just in case I might need to use them for some other project. And I went ahead and I used some Aunt Lydia's crochet thread to go ahead and stitch it onto the side. And I basically did a whip stitch here too, just like I closed the original heart before I painted it. I did that same stitch in black. Since I had different black accents in the other parts of my project, I thought the black would work really well. So I did one side, I did the other, and then when I got down to the point, I just kind of shaped it around there and continued the stitching process. Now to finish off the heart, I went ahead and used some of that red and white ticking fabric, added some glue, and I created some straps on each side because I wanted to use a wooden dowel from a rocking chair, to be able to hang it from. I wanted to say a special thank you to our host today for hosting today's collaboration. Make sure you check out their channels and click that playlist so you can see all the other creative ideas shared today. To add a little bit of finishing details to the front of the straps, I decided to go ahead and glue some buttons on those straps. And I had this big old bow left over from a project I had done a couple years ago, and I thought it would be a great idea to repurpose it on this project. I love the coffee stained fabric and then handmade tag, and that big old key seemed like it would fit this project perfectly. I just used some hot glue to glue it down, and I thought that would work fine. Once the hot glue had set, I decided that side also needed a button, so I created a button, a stacked button. I did a black button first, and then I put a red button on the top. I like the idea of stacking the colors, a little bit of the dark and a little bit of the red. Seemed to bring the project all together. Well, let's see what this project looks like all finished and hung up. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment and let me know what you think of this project. I'd love to hear what you thought about the slow stitching process and if it might be something you might try in your future. Leave me a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's tutorial. Well, thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll come back and see me again, and next time you'll create right along with me.